If your business is underperforming, and I've been there, I'm raising my hand. I've been there. My businesses have been underperforming. It's so easy for me as the franchisee to blame the franchisor. And there is probably some truth in some of those that I've been in that were underperforming. In some, it was very much weighted to the franchisor that was not ready to be a franchisor like that. But I still look at it like, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to change? As a underperforming franchisee, you are going to probably lose money when you sell.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn.
Well, welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast. It's a solo episode with me. I've been using AI like crazy. I want to talk about some ways I use artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and different ones, how I'm thinking about it now. And then I said, make a list of the most controversial, challenging questions in franchising or topics in franchising, because I'm doing a podcast on that. And so that made a list, and they were all softballs. They weren't really that challenging. So I said, no, make it really, really, really hard. And so the first one says predatory franchise contracts. So I've got like, I don't know how many questions I have. I've got about 20 different questions that ChatGPT gave to me for that. And I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. But first, let me tell you how I am thinking about AI these days. So at Front Street Equity Partners, we are a non-traditional FSO. So what we do is we do traditional FSO work, meaning we help franchisors as that outsourced franchise sales arm for them. Where we are very different is we are very much aligned to the back end with that brand. Let me give you a quick example, and then I'll get into some of the ways that I'm using Chat GPT and Claude as I go into these conversations. So what we do, like let's say there's a franchise brand. They're a very popular brand or going to be a popular brand. They have, 5 locations of corporate locations. They are making 40% profit margins. They're doing $1 million in gross revenue. By the way, all of this is completely made up. And they have 2 franchisees that are doing exactly what the founders did, and they're in amazing markets, and they're gonna be the most amazing validators you've ever heard. And the model's so simple. It's semi-absentee, it's scalable, it's repeatable, it's a dream. What happens is that brand will go to an FSO, a franchise sales organization, somebody outsourced selling for that brand besides the owner or the franchise development person that's outsourced. Franchise goes to a company like that and they say, "Hey, here's the deal. Here's my story." They just say everything that I told you. And the brand is hoping that there's an alignment there. And the FSO says, absolutely, we could sell 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 of these units next year. And the brand is just seeing dollar signs. Because franchise fees, stores opening, profits, enterprise value increases, and they're like, sign me up. And most of the time, that does not work out very well because the brand was not ready to grow like that. Sometimes they are, and that traditional FSO model is perfect for that brand. Sometimes it's not. So, same company has a different conversation with a different FSO, not us, but a different FSO. And, that FSO is like, holy cow, we could sell 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 of these units or locations or territories in the next year. But like, we're not equipped to do that. If we did that, we would not be doing you any justice because you would find yourself not being able to support, not helping them or the franchisees open. You have a lot of expenses going out, especially if it's a retail concept, a lot of expenses going out before you see a dollar of royalty revenue. And we don't think that you're really ready for that based off of the support step that you have, your experience in franchising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they say, why don't we just continue to talk for the next year or 2 years and we'll help you out here and there. Or that FSO will say, hey, you should talk to the folks over at Front Street Equity. They are a non-traditional FSO. They will help brands like you, but they only take on 1, 2, maybe 3 brands if they have the capacity a year. And so we get those referrals from other FSOs. And when we have a conversation with a brand, same scenario, that brand says, hey, we want to sell, we got this amazing brand, we got this amazing everything. And we're like, holy cow, we could sell 1, 2, 3, 500 locations for you that first year. But that would absolutely destroy your business. We will not do that. Like categorically, no, we will not do that because we are incentivized to grow at a good pace with you. That's how we're incentivized. We don't take retainers. We do a lot of things differently. And the biggest thing is we spend our time. Our time's worth a lot of money over at with us founders at Front Street. And so we're investing our time into these brands. An example is today we had a call with the the COO, the founder, and there was 4 of us partners on that call. All 4 of us Front Street partners were on that call because we're taking care of business. We're helping them out. Right after that, there's another call with Bobby. He was talking about franchise development, hour-long call with the COO and the founder. And there's multiple calls. There's multiple texts going through. We don't have the time to give the brand that wants to go from very few units to a lot of units over even the right time frame. Maybe it's 50 units their first year, 150 their second year. Then they can really grow and scale, but they have the foundation to do it because we've helped them build it through being in the trenches with that founder every step of the way. That's what I mean by a non-traditional FSO. So going back to AI, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, these different things, tools that I use, I wanted to have a full report on a brand because I talk to hundreds of brands a year. I want to have a full report on them before I have my first conversation with them. So I've had hundreds of calls. I uploaded a bunch of notes into ChatGPT. And then I found some reports that I really liked as well. So maybe it's some stuff from McKinsey. Maybe it was just reports that I've seen out there. I asked like, what do the best do out there for building reports, whether they're going to be doing some consulting through McKinsey or private equity or an investment banker would look at before they're ready to buy or transact a business. And so I just started to gather all of this information. Then I saw, so that's one thing. Then I saw some amazing reports that I liked, and I would love it formatted like that. So I put those reports into ChatGPT. I said, reverse engineer this and pull up give me prompts to create a report like this. And I was doing this all through audio. So I put it in there, and then I was just having a conversation like I would have with a consultant of mine that was helping me build really good reports. And so I would say something, ask them their thoughts. They would tell me, and I would say, what about if you thought about it this way? What questions should I be asking that I'm not asking today? So I was using AI, ChatGPT, as an advisor, having a conversation, that's a mentor. If I'm wanting to do some stuff on leadership, I say, you are John Maxwell, respond like John Maxwell. And I'm doing some similar stuff with asking good questions. Attention, franchisors and franchisees, there are 2 really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisor and you're frustrated that you're not awarding as many franchises as you thought you would, this is the reason I created the Franchisor Mastermind. If you want access to the information, the techniques that the best franchise sales organizations are using to award franchises, and you want what mature brands have with their playbook of having happy, successful franchisees that grow the right way, then you might want to check out the Franchisor Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections. They want the playbook to achieve both short-term and long-term success. They want to increase enterprise value in their brand. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. Joe Rogan asks very good questions. Tim Ferriss asks really good questions. They have two very different ways of doing it. So I combined their way of asking questions into this report as well. And so at the end of the day, I created like an 8-page prompt. So now all I do is I copy and paste that 8-page prompt. The only thing I fill in is the name of the brand that I'm about ready to research. It kicks out everything, including like SWOT analysis. I want to know franchisees' happiness or challenges, or custom employees' happiness challenges, and same with customers. So you can start to get all of this stuff out there, all these different data points, and it pulls it together for me. So that is the way that I'm using. And I put in FDDs. I put that in there. I put in, I've got a lot of different websites that I go to that I make sure that they pull information from that as well. But what it's doing is giving me this tool to, instead of wasting a bunch of time asking questions to answers that I have at my fingertips, I can now dig deeper to see if I like the founder, if I think they have what it takes, to see if they're at the stage, if they're ready for us, or if I can, I've referred somebody to another FSO today because they could actually help them better. And that FSO will never even know that I referred that franchisor to them because I don't ask for anything in return. So that's how I'm recently using AI. I'm using like as a sparring partner, a thought partner. If I'm want to ask myself better questions and get I have them interview me like they're Tim Ferriss or they're Joe Rogan, and ask me better questions. And you can do this just through voice. I was going to play pickleball. Took me about 20 minutes to get there. And I was just going back and forth on doing some stuff for my podcast, but just using voice and getting real-time information back and creating a really good prompt. So all that to say, here we are on the podcast, and I used AI. I've not looked at this. I just read you number one, predatory franchise contracts. I figured we'd just go one by one, and I might pass on some of them if I don't feel like I have anything really good to add. But I thought this would be fun because there's a lot of controversial stuff out there. Some of it I might agree with it, some of it I might not. But I hope to provide you some at least ways to look at things a little bit differently. So, number one, predatory franchise contracts. Are standard franchise agreements inherently one-sided, protecting the franchisor and leaving the franchisees vulnerable? So, is the franchise contract weighted to the franchisor? 100%. Like it's 100% weighted to the franchisor. In some ways, you can look at that and that will protect you as a franchisee. And in some ways, it's going to hurt you as a franchisee. Think about it this way. You are a top performing franchisee. You have a neighbor that doesn't turn on their open sign, doesn't answer their phone, doesn't call customers back. If you were to go on Yelp and or any type of review, they would have like a 1-star rating. You have 5-star. So in that particular case, as the top performing franchisee with an underperforming, lazy franchisee that's not doing anything with the business, you would want that franchisor to enforce parts of the contract Like, you need to spend money on marketing to get customers in the door. You need to have your door open. You can't go market it in your neighbor's territory. All of these different things that are weighted to the franchisor, you want them to enforce the contract because of that. Now, if you're the bottom performing franchisee, then you really don't want that. You're just like, just let me do my thing. I'm not spending a lot of money. I'm not making a lot of money, but nothing doesn't really bother me. So don't make me sell at a loss because my business is not worth as much. And by the way, if your business is underperforming, and I've been there, I'm raising my hand. I've been there. My businesses have been underperforming. It's so easy for me as the franchisee to blame the franchisor. And there is probably some truth in some of those that I've been in that were underperforming. In some, it was very much weighted to the franchisor that was not ready to be a franchisor like that. But I still look at it like, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to change? And so, as a underperforming franchisee, um, you are going to probably lose money when you sell. And I've lost a lot of money selling, meaning in quotes, probably giving things away, still being on the hook for loans or capital that I've had out. And I've made way more money by having amazing success in franchising. But there have been, couple here, couple there that have not been those successes. And I get to hear this from everybody in franchising. I get all the private messages, I get the phone calls, I get the text messages. And so I get to hear a lot, and there's a lot of amazing things and there's a lot of troubling things. So that's just one example of when you probably do want that contract weighted towards the franchisor so they can really enforce it. But there's going to be times when, the franchisor could play hardball. Most of the time they don't play hardball. An example of that is in most franchise contracts, if you like just go missing in action, you just shut the door, that franchisor can come after you for future royalties. I've personally never seen it done. I've heard it threatened. I've never seen it done. I do know people that have said they have seen that done, but that is something that is teeth would be considered teeth in a contract for a franchisor to enforce the franchisee to do what they are contractually obligated to do. Do we want like government regulation coming in? Probably a little bit. Do we want overreach of government regulation? Because, I'd say probably not. All right, let's go on to number two, overblown earnings claims. This is so the talking point on this is, do franchisors sometimes mislead prospective franchisees with inflated revenue and profit projections? I've seen it done. I love getting on calls with franchisees and franchisors, and they're like, Erik, you say things that nobody else says out there in franchising because it's true. And I hope to provide a balanced perspective. I hope to show you how a franchisor looks at things and how a franchisee might look at things. And so you as a buyer can make informed decisions, or gives you a better point of view as a franchisee or a franchisor. So I've seen earnings claims that are factual, and none of these are recent that I'm talking about. So just in case you're like, oh, I know what that brand is, because I see that in the Facebook group all the time. Someone's like, oh, you have problems with your franchise, huh? I bet I know what that brand it is. And they post as anonymous, and I get to see all the who they are. They're anonymous. I see who it is. I'm like, you guys are so far off. People just live in their own little world, and they think if it's a bad franchise or one person says it's bad, it's got to be their franchise. It most of the time it's not. So the information I'm giving here is outdated information, because I don't have anything real recent that I'm aware of. But here are some things I would say to look out for. I just did a session in the franchisor mastermind on building item 19s. and we were going over it. At no point did we say, you should exaggerate here or leave this out because it looks bad or what. Like at no point. And one of the questions was even from one of the franchisors is like, if we have something that looks really bad, should we leave it out? And and if it's accurate, it might show a better picture. It might, it might show building that your retention rate might be really low, but it's better than last year. So should you put that in? I think it's showing a positive trend. So maybe you put a metric like that in. I think I'm a big fan of having more KPIs, more information in the item 19. So when prospective buyers are validating, talking to franchisees, they can ask like, "Oh, I see retention rate looks like it's about X amount. Are you finding that in your locations? Or customer acquisition cost is this, or lifetime value is that." Whatever the KPIs are, cost X amount to get a customer from digital, it costs this much otherwise. Like that's all really important stuff. Franchisees are much more likely to give you answers on that than they are like you get on the phone with somebody and they're like, "Hey, this is Jim Bob from Spearfish, South Dakota. I'm wanting to buy a franchise. How much net profit did you take home in 2024? And what was your revenue?" They don't like talking about that. And it can be very misleading as well. How much are they taking out in in distributions? How much are they paying themselves? And so what is net profit in their mind? Just for the record, like I've found franchisees all over the board in what they say net profit is. And a lot of times net profit's much higher than they say it is because they're paying themselves. They're paying for 2 vehicles that are run through the business that are used for personal. They're running trips through the business because there's some, they're treating a business like a business should be treated. You run expenses through a business. And so they've got labor out of that. They're paying their kids out of that, legally, of course. And at the end of the day, hopefully they're left with not as much money as they could if they didn't have all those ad backs. So anyway, that's just something to consider when you're out there validating. But overblown earnings claims. Here's some ways that I've seen in the past. You can kind of selectively so you have to be consistent across the board on what you choose to put in. You can't say, "Oh, I want everybody that made this much money to be in the item 19." You can't do that. But you can get real selective. And so there's a lot of franchises that are open, but only a couple in the item 19 that might be a warning to dig deeper into that and see why. And there might be a completely reasonable answer and there might not be. But let's say they've cherry picked. It's obvious that they cherry picked. They put 3 locations in there, um, and they're not the founders' locations, but there's 3 locations, and the brand has 20 locations that have been open up for a year or more. Um, that that might mean they're just completely cherry picking in a really weird way. So read all the notes to see how they did it. So legally, can they do that? Let's say they can. You need to figure out why they did that. This is a bad way to do an item 19, by the way. And then they might put locations in there that I've seen this where there was an anomaly of a year in a particular location that had massive returns, like 3 to 4 times what a normal franchisee would have in that particular business. And this is a brand that I've never been a part of. I just know. And so it was an anomaly. Was it factual? Did they make $1 million that year? 100%. Did they do it the year before? No. Did they do it the year after? No. Did the franchisor sell a bunch of franchises because of that one item 19 that probably had a million footnotes that nobody cared to read? Yes. That's what I mean by blown earning claims that I've seen. You need to dig deeper. That's my biggest piece of advice is dig deeper into the item 19. All right, I want to keep going. I want to keep this moving. We're only on number 3. The buy a job critique. Some franchises are essentially expensive jobs where the franchisees have limited autonomy and minimal profits. I have seen this and I've had conversations and where franchisees are working 60 hours a week, making 20 to $30,000 and have a lot of employees, a lot on the line. They're stressed out. That's a job. That's a low paying job, not being a business owner, not being a franchise owner. And, it's a lot of low margin businesses. If they can't get to the point where they scale, where you need to understand, like in the hair care business, a lot of these hair care franchisees have quite a few of them because it tends to be a lower, uh, uh, it's a lower total net profit type business. That's very replicatable. It's a need-based business. There's a lot of great things about it, but I just know like these owners have a bunch of them because they need to have a bunch of them. There's other ones that owners have a bunch of them because they just print tons of money in different types of industries. In the past, that's and I don't know if it's currently, but think Planet Fitness. Those franchisees are just, they seem to be printing money versus a hair cutting place, different types of investments. So you see somebody building a business like a Planet Fitness or something like that versus somebody building a small haircut brand, and they're very different types of profiles. So I think when you are how you start to understand if you're buying a job, you need to look at everybody around you as the franchisees and say, do they look like they are and talk like they have a job? Or are they really running a business? Do they have a second in command that has a lot of autonomy themselves to make decisions, to have a path to grow and continuing to grow? The franchisees aren't continuing to add more locations or trucks or whatever the metric is. It's probably a lower paying job. So that's one way to look at that. Um, so I think you really need to understand if you're buying a job, if the franchisor wants you to buy a job, or do they want you to own multiple units? And so I think if you're buying a job, it's like, okay, you get one location and that's yours, and we want you to be full time, and that's it. Versus the franchisor that says, hey, start out here. The roadmap is to get to 3 open locations or 6, whatever the number is, as long as it's growing, or 3 trucks or 10 trucks or whatever it is, so they can grow. That's how you do it. I see a lot if you're in retail, like a retail type brand, and the franchisees don't have management, in place, you're probably going to be buying yourself a job. And if the owner is out there doing anytime the owner's out there doing the actual work, the widget, the cleaning, the building of something, the servicing of something, the product of whatever, if they are the ones delivering that, that's probably buying a job. And so you just need to make sure that if that's not your goal, then don't buy if you see a lot of the owners actually doing that. There's got to be a path, a roadmap to get out of that. Franchisor retaliation for fear of speaking out. Can franchisors bully or threaten franchisees into silence if they criticize the brand? I've heard of that. I've not, when I say I've heard of that, I've heard of, I've heard from franchisees say, I can't say anything. Like I'll get punished if I say anything bad against the brand. And then I've seen brands that have franchisees out there that are ungrateful. It's a part of a really good brand. They're ungrateful. They are just causing problems all the time, and yet they have no idea they are part of a really good brand. Put those same franchisees in a poor brand, and they'll cry all day long. They'll never make it. They should never be a business owner. They should be working at a job where they don't have to interact with the public, and they just, punch in and punch out. Like, that's what they should be doing. They shouldn't be making decisions, having to, manage people, manage inventory, manage customers like that. Those people, they should not be around. And those guys are causing problems in franchise systems. And I've seen franchisors way more often give them so much grace and try to help them versus bring the hammer. So my point on this franchisor retaliation, fear of speaking out, in general, I've seen franchisors be like really try to work with those franchisees versus slam them and whatnot. All right, I'm going to go fast on some of these costly renovation mandates. I've seen that. I'm not in food very much, so I don't know that. Junk fees and mandatory supplier markups. Again, this happen? Absolutely. Is it supposed to be disclosed in the FDD? 100%. Junk fees, mandatory supplier markups, like anything beyond royalties or advertising fees that the franchisees are forced to pay franchisors. Are some of them inflated? Yes, I've seen it. I've paid it. Do the brands that like we're involved with, like, do we encourage that? Absolutely not. Like the goal is for a franchisee to get something at a lesser cost or at the same cost that's consistent across the board. Um, I see a lot of the brands that we work with they're not taking rebates. They're not, and there's nothing wrong with doing that as long as it's disclosed. But up to this point, I've seen a lot of the brands just really wanting to put any savings back into the franchisees' pockets. Now, that's not always the case. Trust me, I know of many brands that mark up costs and they pocket big rebates. That happens out there. I think it's definitely something to be aware of, um, and factor that into your budget. Number 7, encroachment and cannibalizing markets. When franchisors add new locations dangerously close to existing ones, are they gutting their own franchisees' customer base? I did a podcast on this when I was with Solo Salons. When I sold 12 of those to private equity. I've talked about that numerous times. I won't get into it here. It's one of the reasons we sold is because the person who was not there very long was starting to put pressure on us to expand fast or to or they're going to start selling all around us, and we couldn't have that. And so it's one of the reasons that we sold, and I had a fantastic relationship with the founders of Sola, the leadership at Sola. It was a very a good thing. But it could be somebody in the corporate office that's trying to open up too many too close to you. Back end conversations that I have with franchisors is it's always it. I say always when we're talking to really good founders, they do not want to cannibalize, and more times than not, they're trying to find the sweet spot where competition doesn't come in and grab all the market share. Your brand gets as much market share as it can and yet not cannibalize market share from each other. There's a sweet spot. Are they always going to get it right? No, but you want a brand that is really thinking about the right size territory. Franchise churning. Do some franchisors rely on a revolving door, failing franchisees from profiting from each new franchise fee and sale? I would say this is the exception to the rule of a franchisor is really profiting from each new franchise fee, sale, and resale. The reality is it costs a lot it costs to sell a franchise, and that new franchisee, it costs to train them, and then they're a wild card. You don't know how they're going to do until they actually open up and they start doing business. So if that is a franchise or strategy, it's a really dumb one. We would heavily advise against having that be a strategy at all. Most franchisors that I talk to, the brands that we work with, the founders that I like to talk to, they are trying to help franchisees that are failing. They try to help them get out and they try to help them get as much as they can when they do go out. Let me see. Like this one doesn't make sense. High powered brand control versus local market nuances. This is where most franchisees And I've been there. I say most franchisees because I'm there. I'm like, my market is different. You don't understand my market. And literally every franchisee thinks their market is different. Are there some differences? 100%. Is it enough to like really move the needle? Most of the time, not. So that's why you're going to hear franchisors say, just follow the system. Just do it until you can't do it anymore, or you're so sick. Well, should say that, meaning you can't do it and you fail. That, I mean, that's really not the right attitude. Like you should follow that system until you are so successful, you're testing out new things and you know why the system works. And the systems might have shortfalls. They might have opportunities for improvement. That's when you really start to have that we stage of the franchisor, the franchisee, the franchisor are in sync and they're growing together. Brand repetition from a single bad actor. I would say, a bad actor in the franchise as a franchisee that, let's just say the worst thing happens. They go to prison. They're all over the news and then they're gone. Like I've seen some bad stuff happen in franchising from a single bad actor. I've not seen that have much impact on a brand and have it very lasting as well. Um, that is about it. I think we covered all of the really juicy ones. Let me know which ones you liked, which ones you disagree with me on, which ones you want a deeper dive into, because I just hit the basics off the cuff. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.